Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. People who've seen my hands-free gravity turn video I released a couple of days ago recognise this rocket. It's the Kerbal 1. I promised I was going to actually add some vectors, and I've done that. It's a good excuse to install Kerbal operating system 1.2 on my new computer and get it running, and not knock up a quick script to make sure it's all working okay. So I'll just go through the vectors, the ones you can see anyway. There's actually 4 of them. The white one is gravity, which is down towards the center of Kerbin. The green vector is the way the rocket is the vessel is pointing, which is just going along the long axis of the rocket, because you put the parts in symmetry around the long axis. The yellow one is the air, what I call air velocity, or the velocity relative to the air. It's also called surface velocity, which means the velocity relative to the surface. That's to take into account the fact that Kerbin itself is also moving, so you've actually got two velocities there, but this is the one I'm using. It should actually be 0, but it's obviously not displaying 0, so I think it's kind of Kerbal operating system hasn't calculated it, because the technically speaking the rocket's not actually moving yet, so you just have to use your imagination there. There is a 4th one, which is the acceleration of the rocket, I guess relative to the rocket itself. So therefore it is 0. So you can't see it, which seems to be correct. You'll know straight away that it's not quite the same as a G-force. The G-force is showing 1 here, and I guess it depends on your definition of G-force, but personally I reckon that should be showing 0, not 1, but it's showing 1. That's because the supports are also pushing up with an acceleration of one gravity to counteract the gravity that's going that way. Just take my word for that. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll get it up to 50 meters a second, and then try to see if I can explain the vectors a little bit better. So, and the vessel itself is launch tilted 5 degrees to initiate a hands-off gravity turn. But if you want to know the details of that, go and watch my my video on the subject that I released a few days ago. Alrighty, let's just go. I'm recording this time, good. I've been having all sorts of issues. Okay. Alright. I've got to pause. Unfortunately, when you pause it, you can't actually move the camera around, so that's just the way it is, unfortunately. So you can see gravity's still straight downwards, as you'd expect. The rocket is pointed where the rocket's pointed. The acceleration, due to the thrust of the rocket, that's now appeared, and the yellow one is the resultant velocity relative to the air. And those, even though they at this angle those arrows seem to be the same, sorry, actually I take that back. You'll notice that the way the rocket is pointing is different than the actual velocity itself, and you can see that also down here. You can see the what I'm pointing to now, that's where the rocket is pointing, and the yellow circle there is actually the air velocity. So this rocket is actually already crabbing sideways a little bit. So it's obviously not ideal, because the whole point of my type of gravity turn anyway is to have the way the rocket is pointing and also the air velocity as small as possible, meaning a very low or even a zero angle of attack. That's what the aeronautical people call it. The whole point of doing that is to minimize the aerodynamic stress on the rocket. Yeah, all right. I'll just get up to 100 meters a second, and then start the hands-free gravity turn, and then I'll explain it again. So we just go to resume. Okay. Alright, so now you can see the, because I've switched the prograde follower on, which is the only automatic guidance that I'm going to use, the the rocket is now pointing along the same vector as the velocity through the air, so that's ideal. That's what you want. So this is where the gravity turn magic starts to occur. I'll try to explain it without whiteboarding it. Just like I said, conceptually, even though I don't really know the mathematics all that well. I could probably work it out, I just can't be asked. Okay, so now that we've taken care of, we've minimized air resistance and dynamic pressure, aerodynamic pressure as much as possible. The only two forces that are really still operating on the rocket at this stage are the forward acceleration, because of the thrust coming out the back of the rocket, and also gravity itself. So if the thrust of the rocket is the same as where the rocket is pointing, because we're using these symmetrical rockets with long axes. We're not using any sort of strange shapes or anything like that. So if you add that vector there, the green one, which is going out that way, if you then add that to the gravity that's trying to pull it down, you get a result, which is the addition of two vectors, and that's where the acceleration will operate. So it actually points out somewhere in between those two arrows. And as the rocket flies around, you'll see that applies all the time. While there's thrust, the only time it won't apply is when you're staging. There's no thrust on the rocket. Okay, so just watch how this system evolves. I'll just resume again and wait to the first staging. You can see the rocket is tipping over because it's doing a gravity turn. Alright, so it's evolved a little bit. Things have changed. Obviously, because I've got the prograde follower switched on, the rocket is always trying to realign itself to point straight through the air velocity vector. And it's got two but you can see that so you've still got the thrust, which is going in that direction, and you've still got gravity, which is pulling down, and the red arrow is still the resultant force from those two vectors competing with each other. You can see it's pointing downwards. It's starting to actually point downwards. That's the way the acceleration is working. So gravity is actually starting to win, and that's what actually causes the rocket to start to tip over. I hope I'm explaining this well enough. And of course we're still gaining altitude, but you're even though but the resultant acceleration is actually downwards, but you've obviously still got momentum carrying you in that direction as well. So it's kind of a bit of an interesting interplay between the forces there. So I'll continue on to the next staging. All right. It's a bit hard to see the guidance working because it happens slowly. So you always see those two arrows, the way that the rocket is pointing, and also the velocity through the air being the same. But if you go back to the start of the video, that there was a difference between them, and they've just the prograde follower has just made that difference as small as possible. And you can see here it's still pretty well lined up. If they weren't lined up, then again the rocket would be sort of crabbing across the sky, and the aerodynamic pressure or the airflow wouldn't be going straight down along here. It would be off to one side or something. And there is a cheat menu that actually lets you display that, but I won't introduce another vector now. I think everyone's probably already getting a little bit confused, and I get confused just explaining it sometimes, because it's four vectors you're looking at, and I don't sort of want to add another vector at this stage. You'll notice that you probably may not have noticed, but the gravity vector has actually decreased slightly. That's because we've moved away from the center of Kerbin a bit more, and you can see that the acceleration is now really starting to head towards the horizon, which is what you expect. And the result of that is there's less and less of the thrust of the rocket causing it to go straight up away from the center of Kerbin, and more of the thrust is going into moving it perpendicular to the center of Kerbin, which is actually what you want, because you at some point it won't let me change it because I'm in pause. At some point you have to move sideways. That's what the bottom line is to get into an orbit. Otherwise you'll just go straight up and come straight back down again. Right, so I think I'll just I'll resume it, and then I'll switch over the display, because the testing criteria I've been using is to get up to an apoapsis of 100 kilometers, and then cut the thrust there, and hope that the rocket is high enough in the atmosphere that the air resistance doesn't bleed off all the velocity and drag it back down again. Okay. Yeah, you can see the apoapsis is going up there. I'll just keep my finger on the cut thrust button. You can still see it's still turning over, but more and more slowly. That's because the faster the rocket is going, the harder and harder it is to actually. I can explain that, I think, because because the thrust is actually a little bit less, and gravity hasn't decreased all that much. So that means the velocity is getting higher and higher. That means to actually cause this arrow to move due to acceleration, it has less and less an effect on it. So that's what they mean when they say the rock. It's easy to turn a rocket when it's going slowly, and it's harder and harder to turn it the faster and faster it goes. That's what they're talking about. See, this is only I'm not actually scaling this arrow here to show the velocity. I'm just showing the direction, because if I was scaling it, it'd be off the screen, by now. And that wouldn't be much use to anybody. So the faster the rocket is going, the harder it is to change direction. So that's why the gravity turn just gets slower and slower as a consequence. And this one's pointing down a little bit further now. Anyway, we'll just resume that. That's because we went in change mode slightly. I talked about that in the last video. It's just the way Kerbal Space Program works. It might overheat. I don't know. I was a bit late on some of the staging. I can always try it again. Yeah, that was the camera. That wasn't me. I'll try to fix it. There's something odd with the camera in this new release. I don't know why it keeps. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, there we go. I fixed it back up again. Alright, so I've cut thrust because the apoapsis is up to 100 kilometers, a little bit higher actually. So the acceleration is now. This is confusing, is it? Now saying the G-force is 0. I still don't quite know how they're working that out. But we've still got an acceleration, but they're both due to gravity, and you'll notice that the values aren't quite the same. So that's another oddity. I think there is something wrong. There's something wrong in the code there. Yeah, I think if you're going to display it like that, they should be the same. But they're not, so it might just be a kind of... It may not be a real value, it might just be a dodgy value because the ship is no longer accelerating. So what I'll do is... alright, so as gravity turns go, that was not too bad. We're still not out of the atmosphere yet, but... So we're going to lose a bit of the apoapsis, but I'll thrust it up a little bit more. So yeah, we're almost into we're pretty damn close to being into an orbit without even any circularization. So that's not too bad in my opinion. It'd only take a little bit of thrusting to get that periapsis up above the atmosphere. So that yeah, if you get it right, you don't have to do a circularization at all. But honestly, it's so fiddly. It's in practice you wouldn't worry about it. It's just too much mucking around. So I was going to just what I'll do. I might I'll leave that pointing into prograde. I might just apply a little bit of thrust and see what happens to the acceleration arrow. See if it disappears or moves or whatever. It might shift completely. Alright, we're almost... Actually, let's just wait till we're out of the atmosphere. It'll only take half a minute. Because the camera angle may change again. It's when the music starts playing, you know, the sort of celestial body music or whatever they call it. That's when you know you're out of the atmosphere. Which is just about ready to happen. There you go. There's the music. I hope you can hear that. Yeah, so you know you're above the atmosphere when you hear that music. Alright, let's just apply a little bit of thrust and see what happens to the... So keep your eye on the red arrow. This is a pure experiment that I'm doing right now. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to have to think about that. I am honestly puzzled. I can't understand how they're calculating that red arrow. So red arrow question mark. Think about that. Also, I'll do another. I didn't want to make the video too long, but I'll do another video. Showing how I actually put this rocket together to get the acceleration due to gravity acceleration of the vessel itself. Took a little bit of fiddling around to do it, but I found a way of doing it, and I'll just demonstrate that in the next video. And if I think of anything else technical to talk about, I'll talk about that. I just wonder, we're almost. Let's get up a little bit closer. Actually, let's not do it that way. I'll just do a bit of acceleration. Just get as close to the apoapse. I just want to get the periapsis above the atmosphere. Then I'll finish the video. My voice keeps cracking, as you can probably hear. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that at the moment. It all started when we had all the bushfires here, and there's all the bushfire smoke day in, day out. I think it's affected my my voice a little bit. Okay, so we'll just apply. We're all lined up good. Just apply a little bit of thrust and just get it above the atmosphere. So I'm just raising the periapsis at the moment, manually. So I didn't bother setting a maneuver node or anything like that. Doing a Scott Manley. That'll do. Yeah, we should be in orbit now. Yeah, there you go. No, you keep raising it till it gets to 100, but you know, do whatever you're going to do. The whole point is to demonstrate getting into an orbit. I'm not too fussed about getting it perfect or anything like that. So what are our vectors doing? Well, okay, so because we're in an orbit, we're now in a good orbit, and we're undergoing Newtonian physics as it was. I guess it's a bit of a no-brainer that the gravity and your velocity are always going to be at right angles to each other when you don't have any thrust going on. And I think that's a bit of a no-brainer. Hopefully I don't have to explain why I think that is the case. if you don't sort of understand that, what can I say? Without sounding condescending, you've got a bit more Wikipedia work to do. But yeah, when you're in free fall, they're going to be at right angles to each other at all times. That's how an orbit works. Alrighty then, I'll I'll catch you in the next episode.